Real knowledge sounds simple, but most people only memorize words. True understanding comes from rebuilding ideas, not repeating them. The Feynman Technique is a way to learn that forces you to think clearly. You do not just read or listen. You take an idea, break it into parts, and explain it in very simple words. When you do this, you see what you really understand and what you do not. You move from passive learning to active thinking. Feynman used this approach in physics, but it works in any field. It is a shortcut because it removes fake learning and leaves only real understanding. Real knowledge begins when you can explain an idea simply. Memorization can look like learning, but it is often very shallow. You may remember a definition or a formula, but you cannot use it or explain it in your own words. This kind of learning creates false confidence. You have likely felt this. You study something, feel sure you know it, and then freeze when you must explain it or apply it. This happens because your brain stored the words, not the idea. The learning stayed at the surface. It did not reach meaning and structure. Real learning must go deeper than memory. Your mind has to see how the idea works, why it works, and how it connects to other ideas. Without that depth, recall is weak and use is even weaker. The Feynman Technique attacks this problem directly. It exposes where you are only repeating words and pushes you to move from memory to understanding. Memorization is weak because it does not build true understanding. Complex ideas feel hard because they come as one large block. Feynman did not accept them in that form. He broke them into small parts that the mind could handle. You can do the same. When you face a big idea, you do not try to hold it all at once. You ask what the main pieces are. You look for the key elements and separate them into simple units. Each unit should be something you can explain in a short, clear sentence. This is decomposition. It takes a heavy idea and turns it into a set of small pieces. Confusion usually comes from mixing too many parts together. When you separate them, you reduce confusion. You also see which parts you understand and which parts are still unclear. The mind works best with simple, clear units, linked step by step. Breaking ideas into simple parts builds clarity. The heart of the Feynman Technique is explanation in simple language. If you cannot explain an idea in plain words, you do not really understand it. This is a strict test, but it is very useful. You start by pretending you are explaining the idea to someone much younger, or to someone with no background. You cannot hide behind complex terms. You must use common, everyday words. If you must use a technical term, you also explain it in plain language. When you try this, you see the truth about your understanding. Parts you thought were clear suddenly feel vague. Sentences break down. You catch yourself repeating the book instead of expressing your own thought. This is not failure. It is information. Simple words force you to face what you know and what you do not. Simple explanation is the test of real knowledge. When you explain an idea in simple words, gaps appear. Feynman treated these gaps as the most important part of the process. They show you exactly where to work. You may find a step you cannot explain. You may realize you do not know why one part leads to another. You may see a term you never really understood. These are knowledge gaps. They are not a sign that you are bad at learning. They are a map of what you need to learn next. The method tells you to go back to the source at these exact points. You reread, ask questions, or search for a clearer explanation. Then you return to your own explanation and fix the weak part. You repeat this until the gap is gone and the idea feels stable. Progress comes from finding and fixing these weak spots, not from hiding them. Finding and fixing gaps builds stronger knowledge. After you see your gaps, you rebuild the idea. Learning becomes a cycle. Explain, find gaps, study again, and explain better. Each cycle makes the idea clearer. You take your rough explanation and refine it. You remove vague phrases. You add the missing steps. You correct any mistakes you found. You aim for a version that feels simple, clean, and complete. You should be able to say it in clear language without feeling lost. This is iterative processing. You are not just reading once and hoping it stays. You are shaping the idea in your mind. Each pass makes the structure stronger. The idea becomes something you can hold and move around, not just something you saw in a book. This constant refinement leads to deep understanding. Rebuilding an idea creates deeper understanding. Real knowledge allows you to use an idea, not just talk about it. Feynman tested his understanding by using examples. If an idea is clear, it should work in simple, real cases. You can test yourself by taking an idea and applying it to an example you create. The example does not need to be complex. It just needs to be a situation where the idea should make sense. You then see if your simple explanation helps you handle that example. If your explanation guides you and the example fits, your understanding is likely strong. If you get confused, or if the example does not match what you expected, then something is still unclear. You go back, refine your explanation, and test again. This step turns theory into practice and makes your knowledge easier to recall, because your brain remembers both the idea and how it was used. Examples confirm true understanding. Complex language can give an illusion of understanding. Long terms and heavy phrases may sound smart, but they often hide confusion. Feynman preferred simple, direct language for this reason. When you rely on complex terms, you can repeat them without knowing what they mean. Your brain stores the word, not the idea. The Feynman technique pushes you to replace complex language with simple words. If you cannot do that, it means you do not yet fully understand the concept. You take each key term and try to state its meaning in clear, short sentences. You strip away extra words until only the essential idea remains. This lowers mental load because your brain has less to juggle. It also makes your thinking more honest. Simple words do not hide weak thinking. They show it, and then you can fix it. Removing complex language strengthens clarity. Once you have your own simple explanation, you are not finished. Feynman would compare his understanding with the original source to make sure nothing important was lost. You place your explanation next to the textbook, lecture notes, or reference. You check whether the main points match. You look for details you may have dropped, but which still matter. You also look for places where you may have changed the meaning without noticing. If your version is simpler but still true to the original idea, the technique worked. If your version is missing key parts or adds ideas that are not really there, you adjust it. You keep the language simple but correct the meaning. This step protects you from oversimplification. It keeps your learning both clear and accurate. Comparing explanations ensures accuracy and truth. The Feynman technique is most powerful when it becomes a habit. Feynman used this way of thinking often, not just before exams or talks. It was part of how he learned, taught, and worked. You can build the same habit by using the technique on small ideas each day. You pick a concept, explain it in simple words, find gaps, rebuild, and test with examples. It does not always have to be a big topic. Even small ideas benefit from this process. With repetition, your brain learns to think in this style by default. You start to notice gaps faster. You avoid hiding behind complex language. You naturally break ideas into simple parts. You become more comfortable with testing your own understanding. Over time, clear thinking becomes easier and faster. You are no longer doing a special exercise. You are just thinking this way all the time. Regular practice turns the method into a strong habit. The Feynman technique is not just for school subjects or exams. You can apply clear thinking to work, personal decisions, news, and everyday problems. When you face something important, you try to explain it in simple words. You see if you really understand the issue or are just repeating phrases from others. You can also use this method in communication. When you explain things clearly to other people, you help them understand and test your own understanding at the same time. This makes your conversations more useful and reduces confusion. The technique becomes a general tool for thinking, not just a study trick. It turns you into someone who seeks real understanding in many areas of life. The Feynman technique strengthens thinking in everyday life. When you use the Feynman technique, you change how you learn. You stop chasing the feeling of knowing and start building real knowledge. Deep understanding comes from active work with ideas, not from passive exposure. You break complex ideas into simple parts. You explain them in plain language. You find and fix gaps. You rebuild the idea until it is clear. You test it with examples. You remove complex language. You compare your version with the original. You repeat this process until the idea feels solid and simple. The result is knowledge you can trust. You can explain it, use it, and connect it to other ideas. You do not fall apart when someone asks you to go deeper. You know where your understanding is strong and where it still needs work. Real knowledge is the result of active understanding, not passive memorization.